This week on the Destination Angler.
I tell people all the time, the quality of the cast will lead to more fish, not the quantity. Making the right cast, even if it's only 12 or 15 feet away with a good drift, will always trump, making more casts.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
You can join in the conversation with our new Facebook group called the Destination Angler Connection. Please check that out when you get a minute or two. And if you've had a quality experience with a guide and think he or she would be a great guest for the show, please drop me a line on email or Facebook or Instagram. And today our destination is Basalt, Colorado, and the legendary Frying Pan River. And our guest is expert guide and fly fisherman Eli Vock with Frying Pan Anglers. The Frying Pan is a designated gold medal fishery by the state of Colorado. Only about 3% of Colorado's trout streams carry this seal, and for good reason. The pan, as it's known, is a year-round trophy tailwater, known for prolific hatches, big fish, and lots of them. And did I mention the scenery is amazing? Originally a city boy from New York City, Eli spent his 400 years fishing for stripers off Long Island. After graduating from Drexel University in Philly with a degree in finance and doing some time in the corporate world, he broke free and has been living the dream as a guide in Colorado ever since. He's now a top guide at Frying Pan Anglers, specializing on the Frying Pan, the Roaring Fork, and Colorado rivers, three pretty darn amazing fisheries. So let's listen while Eli fills us in on the tremendous fishing opportunities in this part of the world. Eli, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So you were telling me just before the show that you took a 93-year-old angler out fishing this week. How did that go?
It was completely inspirational. This was a father-son trip. Like I said, I took it 2 days ago. In the beginning, sometimes when you talk to these people on the phone, you don't really know what they're going to be like when you show up to the fly shop and start running the trip. Our flows right now at the time of recording are about 320 CFS on the Frying Pan, which we would consider to be big, higher levels of water. So, you always got to be cautious when you've got older people in the water, making sure that you're not pushing them beyond their comfort zone. Taking a spill in the Frying Pan River, that can change a day for sure. That water is really cold. So yeah, this fellow, like I said, he was a real inspiration. I had him getting into some spots that, 40-year-old people have struggled with.
Wow.
And it was a great, great day.
Yeah. So no spills. You didn't float the hat, huh?
Yeah, no spills. Again, at the time of recording, the green drakes have been still coming off. So it was great fishing, big dry flies, size 10, size 12 stuff. And yeah, just a great day with great people.
That's great. Yeah. And you've had some really crazy weather here lately in Colorado, right? You've had lots of heat, then you had some snow, right? And then more heat and some rain.
Yep.
And let's throw in some fires as well. How's all that been affecting, what you do?
Yeah. So at the end of August, it was real tough. I'd even say in the beginning of August through that month, that was a tough month. The fishing, when they've got that low water and low flows for so long, it really doesn't even more so, not just does it stress out the fish, but the insects. The hatches were so weak for so long that finally, once they increased the water flows on the Frying Pan, it really kicked up those bugs. We were fishing Baetis well into the beginning of July even. Most of the time, you're already getting into PMD hatches, drake hatches, all kinds of stuff that time of year. So low water conditions, not only is it tough on the fish, but it can be tough on the bug life. On the Roaring Fork in the Colorado, come the end of summer with those flows so low, water was low, water temps were high, the fish were stressed. So once we finally got that rain and snow, it really kind of, helped these fish settle. Water temperatures went back down, fish are starting to move into that, at least the browns are, that pre-spawn sort of mood. Streamer fishing has been really great when that happens. And then, the forest fires, we've had 2 of them in our area, one west of us by Grand Junction, the Pine Gulch fire, and then the one just here in Glenwood Springs, that's the Grizzly Creek fire. And that Grizzly Creek fire, I think now is 90% contained and burns about like 33,000 acres. So for a little while there, it was definitely tough, but the rain and snow did help us.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So you mentioned a couple other rivers here, the Roaring Fork and the Colorado. So give us some background on the fishing opportunities in this part of Colorado. Is it pretty much, is that the game, those three major rivers?
For our area, it is, yep. We also have the Crystal River that runs, from Marble and that valley down 133 to Carbondale and eventually runs into the Roaring Fork just below Carbondale Boat Ramp. So the Roaring Fork is a freestone, starts up in Aspen there, up Independence Pass, runs all the way down to Glenwood where it meets the Colorado River. And that's a great place to go fish. The fish are opportunistic feeders. Each section, whether it's the upper section, which I'd consider Aspen to Basalt, let's say, and then you've got the middle section, Basalt to Carbondale, and then you've got the lower section, Carbondale down to Glenwood. Each one of those sections has its own unique features. If you're fishing it up by Aspen, you've got big boulders, big rainbows, nice sort of pebble and gin clear water. Oh, this time of year, and then you kind of move into the middle section where the river just gets a smidge wider. It's still got some structure, big rocks and, ledges to work with, all that kind of stuff. And eventually when you hit the lower section, you get a little, even wider there, some slower water, nice hopper water when the season allows for it, some good streamer fishing down there this time of year. And from the middle section and the lower section down, that's all gold medal water. From where the Frying Pan River in Basalt runs into the Roaring Fork and all the way down to Glenwood Springs, they consider gold medal water. Now, that's not to say that the fishing up in Aspen isn't great. Fishing Jaffe Park and fishing those little, spots up there can be a lot of fun, great quality fish. If you fish up there during pre-runoff, you can use some big stoneflies, and that's a great time to find some of those big rainbows.
That's cool. Yeah, good. And what's the Colorado like? Yeah, in this part of the world.
Yeah, so the Colorado is a much bigger body of water. It's the fish, again, are freestone behavior sort of fish where they're going to be opportunistic feeders. You can start, fishing hatches earlier in anticipation of them coming and still find fish. So, come post runoff, you can start fishing some bigger stonefly patterns, green drake patterns, all that kind of stuff, even if they're not necessarily on the water, and it'll produce fish.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep. Streamers are always in play on that river, I guess, with the exception of that, August, sort of September window when the moss becomes suspended, and it's really just more frustrating than anything else at that point. You're kind of limited to, fishing dries, maybe nymphing if you can have the patience to deal with, cleaning the moss off. But the Colorado, the Colorado, although it's not a gold medal fishery for our little section down here, there are some real good quality fish. You can easily join, the 25 plus inch club, whether it's brown trout, cutbows, whatever down there.
Wow.
The trade-off being if you were fishing the lower fork, for example, you could get action all the way through. If you're fishing the Colorado, sometimes you've got to realize, this is quality over quantity. We may be going down a stretch of river there for 40 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, not touching a fish, and boom, all of a sudden you get one monster brown. Then all of a sudden, you find nothing. Then you float down a little more, you find something else. And if you're waiting on the Colorado River, and even the fork for that matter, you do kind of have to plan on doing some car hopping. Pull up to a spot, maybe fish it out for an hour or so, hop back in the car, find a new spot, move around, shuffle around. It's big water on the Colorado.
Yeah, that's cool.
I've had folks I've taken fishing, talk about the lower Roaring Fork that way. There's some great public access down below Carbondale. And when we get down to the river, they're looking at it like, oh man, where do I start fishing? Where are the fish? And similar to what you've had other guides touch on in previous episodes, you've got to read the water and break it down into smaller parts. Work your way through step by step. Don't just all of a sudden dump 40 or 50 feet of line out there and throw it right down the middle. You still got to, be precise about where you're fishing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love about fly fishing, you actually got to think, right? It's got to know a little bit about entomology and a lot about fish behavior. Well, that's a great overview. So I was in Colorado earlier this summer and came across this really cool app called Trout Routes. If you've ever looked for a good map to help you with anything from public access to finding the best trout streams in a given area, I highly recommend checking out Trout Routes. Trout Routes has mapped out each and every trout stream by state, covering public land, access, places to camp, hiking trails, stream flows, bridge access points, boat launches, fly shops, and even interactive elevation charts. And you can download maps for offline use. Today they cover 7 states, including Colorado and the Driftless region in the Midwest. Hey, we did a show on the Driftless a couple of months ago. And good news, they're working on a big update to add 7 new states, including Montana, Wyoming, and Michigan. So if you have an upcoming trip or looking to explore nearby streams, I suggest you check out Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. So tell me, where is the frying pan? Obviously, it flows through Basalt. Where does it start? And give us a little description, how you kind of break the river down.
So I would break the river down into 2 different parts. You've got the headwaters section and then the tailwater section. In the middle is Haigh Reservoir. And, the headwater section that runs through the mountains into Haigh is awesome fishing. You don't find the same quality of fish that you might find in the tailwater section below the dam, but it is absolutely loaded, much less pressure than the tailwater section. And, it's a beautiful place to go. We've seen all kinds of wildlife up there when we go fishing, moose, bears, classic Western wildlife. Yeah. But, it's pockety water, big boulders, kind of similar to what I was talking about. As you get higher in elevation towards Aspen on the Roaring Fork, the frying pan can be the same way. Pockety water, big boulders, log jams, all that kind of stuff. And what's awesome about it is, you can find brook trout up there, brown trout, all kinds of cool stuff. And it just, offers something different from the tailwater section. Then the middle bit, you have Haigh. The closest town is Meredith, Colorado up there. And, if you're fishing Haigh, you get a lot of sort of stocky rainbows, like the inlet section where the headwaters of the pan running to the reservoir. Great place to take kids to learn. If someone's never fished before, or, it's a younger kid, like I've taken a couple kids, 6 years old up there this summer, and it's a blast. If you're looking for a trophy brown trout, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you just want to go out there and get a feel for, what this is about, practice timing of the hook set and all that kind of stuff, that's a good place to go. From there, the actual reservoir itself, if you're fishing at ice off and, you want to try to catch a lake trout or something and bring an 8-weight and, throw some big flies out there, lots of other guides at frying pan anglers I know have had success fishing for those Lakers that way. And I'll shout out Jordan Duchesne for a great fish he caught 3 or 4 years ago now from the bank there at the reservoir.
How big?
It's got to be close to 30 at least. I don't know. And, on the fly from shore, I mean, that's a special fish.
Yeah.
So, that's a nice little feature we have at the reservoir there. And then below that, the tailwater section, that's the gold medal fishing section of the frying pan there. That's where, you can find some real good quality rainbows. There's a ton of brown trout now. You still get some cutties that creep in from Rocky Fork and that kind of stuff, although it's very rare to find them. And, handful of cut bows in there too. Some pretty looking fish.
Okay. So the frying pan is a super famous river. Why do you suppose that is? What is it about the frying pan that causes anglers to flock from all over to that river?
There's a list of reasons. As far as dry fly fishing goes, it is a supreme dry fly fishery. From February all the way through to, November about, you can fish dry flies productively if that's what you want to do. Now, obviously, in the early months, you got to use small stuff, midges, and eventually betas. And, as the season progresses, you can work your way into the bigger bugs. But the fact is that those fish have so much food there, quite often they're looking up, like I said, and it can be a lot of fun. So that would be one reason I would say to dry fly fishing. Reason number two, I think, is just the scenery. You've got beautiful, beautiful, like red rock sandstone cliffs, green trees that are growing out, all kinds of berries and hops and things that grow along the shore. The wildlife, like I said, we've seen bears, bighorn sheep, elk, moose, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So you never know what you're going to find up there. And, as far as the fishing goes and the allure of, the fish themselves, you can have some great days up there. I mean, I'm talking 20 plus fish days, when it's on sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yesterday on my trip, we were swinging some soft tackles before the hatch kicked off. And like, no exaggeration, maybe if you were making 12 casts, 10 out of those, 12 were getting some action.
Wow. It's good.
Yeah. When it's on, it's on. Definitely some of those fish will make you work for them. Small tippet, small bugs, that sort of thing. But overall, I think the number of fish in the river, the quality of the fish, the bug life and the hatches, along with the scenery, that whole little formula right there, I think is what makes it a special place. And
you can fish year round too, right?
Oh, yeah. You can fish year round. Sorry, I've totally overlooked that. I've been taking it for granted this whole time.
Yeah.
So, in the winter, it's great conditions. The water's nice and cold, and those big rainbows love to come out and play. So if you're fishing in the winter, you can use egg patterns and midges. You still got to be pretty stealthy because the flows are usually pretty low in the winter, maybe around 80 CFS or so, depending. So you still got to be stealthy, but the fish are generally cooperative, much, much less pressure than if you were to try and, fish for them in July.
Okay.
They're not used to seeing people all the time in the winter. And, some of our best fish for sure come in the winter, guys who are out here skiing or doing other things and, decide to take a day to come fishing, and they usually get rewarded. So,
yeah, the first time I fished the frying pan was in 1988, and I was doing exactly that. We're out there on a ski trip, and, I had to take my fly rod with me. And back in 1988, I was a newbie fly fisherman. And there was a guy in the stream who came alongside me, a really nice guy, and said, "You ever nymph fished before?" Which I hadn't in 1980. I should have hired a guide. But that's the first time I ever went nymph fishing was on the frying pan. And I remember seeing a lot of big fish. I don't think I caught any big fish. I caught a couple of little ones. But, I had my little 7.5 foot bamboo bat and kill fly rod with me or something, completely the wrong rig. But anyway, it was all the things you're saying. It's just beautiful up there. And the frying pan, is it also known for the size of the fish? I mean, you can really tangle with some nice sized trout, particularly up towards the dam.
Yeah, you can. So I'll be totally, honest. The way I feel about it is that the quality of fish, as far as big rainbows, for example, has gone down recently. The number of brown trout, not necessarily big ones, but, juvenile browns is like off the charts. I'm pulling loose numbers here, but I'm going to guess that it's about like 70, maybe 60, 65% brown trout, 20% rainbows, couple cup bows, and then, on the rare occasion, you might find a cutthroat. But the competition for food now and the way these brown trout have been able to, spawn and reproduce and do all these things in a healthy manner, the competition for food is just immense.
Okay.
So, you get a lot of fish in there, but it's definitely special. Like if you're going to break the 20-inch mark on a rainbow in the frying pan, that's a special fish. They're in there for sure, but you've really got to, take the approach of, okay, we're going to hunt for this fish. It's not a situation where you can just kind of blind cast out into the run and find them. Now, of course, you can get lucky and that can happen for sure. But generally speaking, most of us have kind of either had an experience where we've hooked a fish in a certain spot or caught a fish in a certain spot, and then you kind of go back and can work that same little section and try to find them again. They definitely move around when the flows go up and down, and, that's normal behavior. But I think truthfully, people can expect when they fish the frying pan, expect to have some small browns take that fly. Even when you're targeting a larger fish, you may see a 20-inch rainbow sitting in there and give it, make your cast, great presentation, everything. And right before it approaches that fish, you've got like a 10-inch brown coming and slapping the fly.
Yeah.
So you really do have to target those fish, like I said, kind of stalk them, follow them a little, get a read on the way they're behaving, and, decide to make your cast when the time is right.
So that's the key. You gotta target those fish specifically to get a big one. And are you sight casting? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So when the flows allow for it, you can sight fish for these fish very, very easily.
Yeah.
Now I say that, of course, I take people who sometimes they either overlook a fish because of its size, like they're so used to looking for a 12 or 14-inch fish that they're actually looking beyond the 24-inch fish that's sitting there. That's happened all the time. And, especially when people first enter the river, I'm almost like a game warden where I poke my head out of the bush and take a look into the river. I almost never get my boots into the water until I've kind of scanned that first little zone, because so many times you can find a big fish sitting shallow right
there.
Mm-hmm.
Right where you're about ready to walk in and there's a great fish sitting there. Yeah. Well, we've talked about that a lot on this show, the concept of observing, right? Don't just dive in and start casting, you just call your line up and watch. How's public access?
Public access is good. You definitely have to be careful about the private water. In Colorado, you're not allowed to even have your boots in the water. These people own the land under the water. So if you're coming to fish the frying pan, I'd highly recommend stopping by Frying Pan Anglers and buying one of the maps that outlays public and private access. The map is $14.95. It's going to be, good for many years to come. And it really can make a difference, especially if you're coming in the summer. The summer is the busiest season up on the pan, and sometimes it can be hard to find a spot. So if you're not familiar with the river, that map could, make or break your day. If you're able to find a spot that you're confident is public access, that can change a day.
Yeah.
My personal little tip here would be, don't be so concerned about, are there fish here? The fish are everywhere. It's a matter of kind of using the right skills and techniques depending on where you are in the river to get into them.
Okay.
But don't be discouraged. Like if you see an open spot and no cars there, don't think, oh, there must not be any fish. I'm going to keep driving up, 90% of people, I think, go all the way up to the top there in that Rocky Fork Day Use area. It's the busiest spot on the river. Now, it does have the most fish. But again, when you get into that situation, it becomes competitive for food. So yes, there are big ones up there. Yes, the micey shrimp are up there, this and that. But I've still had, all my best fish this year have come from like the middle, lower section of the river.
Oh, wow.
And again, I'm going to shout out Jordan Duchesne for probably the fish of the summer down there as far as our Frying Pan Anglers outfitter is concerned. I think he pulled like a 26-inch rainbow with his guy out of there earlier this year.
Really? Nice. Mm-hmm. He did that himself, or he had a client bring it in, or he did it himself?
Yeah, it was his client. It was his client.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. What's your best ever out of the pan?
Oh, best ever. For people I've fished with, probably around 22, 23. For myself, it's definitely smaller than that. Just don't get as much time out there making the casts. But
exactly.
It's something where if I'm doing, spending a lot of time on the frying pan and I get a day off, like I said, I'll try to go float to Colorado or just do something different to change up the scenery.
Sure.
But yeah, there's some great fish. And look, that's just one example, another guy, Harry Portland, again, with great rainbows in the winter that, him and his clients will pull out of the flats, the section below the dam there. The flats is a great spot to go in the winter and fish for those trophy fish. If, that's the kind of person you are and really all you're looking for is the trophy, that's my recommendation. If, you're okay just being out there and having the fun and doing the thing, usually those people get rewarded. In my experience, when people are talking on the phone the night before a trip, or, you meet them the morning of, and whatever it is, they say, oh man, I need a big brown on a hopper, or let's go throw streamers today, or this and that. Those people usually only end up with a few fish in the net. It's, their wife or whoever it is that comes with the right attitude. Let's give this a shot. Let's have some fun. That, what do you know, at the end of the day, they've got a trophy. So
yeah,
I always tell people, this is 90% mental. You kind of have to be in your element, have a good state of mind, not be in a rush. Like we talked about, not just blind casting when you show up to the river,
yeah,
have some sort of game plan when you approach a spot. Use previous experiences from other spots you've been, other rivers, whatever it is, and, fish tactically. Don't just kind of, start hammering a spot or this or that. And, again, I tell people all the time, the quality of the cast will lead to more fish, not the quantity.
Interesting.
If you just keep making 20 casts, but everyone has a little bit of drag or a little bit of this or too many micro adjustments, sometimes people will mend too much, and little things like that can, put off fish. Like, it's a quality over quantity and that sort of thing. Making the right cast, even if it's only 12 or 15 feet away with a good drift, will always trump, making more casts. So
that's a great point. I'm curious what other, common, I don't know, errors is the right word, or mistakes do you see anglers making on the pan that you sort of have to straighten out as a guide, when you're working with them first thing?
Yeah. And you know what? Usually I can get a read on people right away. Some people, it requires a little more patience, especially if they haven't, had a lot of, or any fly fishing experience. The trade-off being that those people haven't had time to build bad habits. People who I take fishing, who have been doing it for 20 years, like I said, sometimes we'll walk into the river and they'll just start dumping like 40 foot of line and throwing it out there almost as if to say like, hey, look how far I can cast. And I'm, kind of reel them back in, tell them shorten up this line, focus on this run right here, 15 feet, you've got a hot zone here. Like, it's going to be very difficult to set the hook on a fish that's, 40, 50 feet away, whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
So keeping it in your wheelhouse, in that little sweet spot here, is going to be the most productive way for us to fish. So I think a big mistake people make is, kind of casting the line way too far out there when they first start getting there. Another common mistake, definitely, and, this is something we can talk about later with equipment, but so many times people are shocked that we're using 6 and 7X. Even with the flows up right now, I mean, I used some 5X yesterday, no problem, but as soon as I switched it back to 6, you notice a difference, right? I mean, that's how it is. But this is for, a tailwater that gets pressure every day of summer. And, those fish are smart.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that sort of thing really makes a difference. I'm sure people come and, fish 4X or 5X all the time. And, it can be tough, especially if the flows are low. Like I said, at the time of recording, flows are 320 CFS, and we're still having to, use stealthy setups to get into these fish.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So it can make a big difference if you just switch from 5 to 6 or 6 to 7X.
Definitely.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so I got to ask you, where did this name, the frying pan, come from? I believe there's a bit of a story behind that, right?
Yeah. So as legend has it, there were 2 trappers up in the frying pan, valley there above Basalt, and they came across a group of Ute Indians. And, after the conflict, one of the trappers was badly injured, couldn't make it back to town. So his buddy kind of put him in a cave and hung a frying pan up so that he'd be able to go back and find him. And I believe that, that rescue mission was successful.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I guess you got to name a river after something. Might as well,
Yeah.
might as well name it after a story. All right. So love to hear a little bit about your background. So when I called the shop to ask them for a recommended guide, they said you right away. And they said that you probably have the most trips of the year and have really gotten dialed into these fisheries. So how did you end up from Drexel University in New York City all the way out to Colorado being a fishing guide?
Yeah. So, it definitely wasn't something I planned. I guess as a kid growing up, I always loved fishing, but never really, pictured myself being a guide. Like you touched on earlier, I had a job working in finance, and, I kind of hit a point where I said, this is taking too much out of me, more so than I'm getting out of it. And that's when I kind of made the transition to doing guiding full time. I've got to give a big shout out to two guys who helped, teach me the ways out here. So I moved out here in 2014, and I lived with a fella named George Wells. One of his best friends is JC Vivian, two local guys out here. And JC is a great, great fisherman. I mean, I was in awe watching him skate caddis for the first time, and the way, those fish were attacking it, everything. I mean, it was eye-opening for me. Coming from the East Coast, I'd never experienced that. And, he was, how can I put it? For example, if we were standing together and he pointed out a rising fish and I made a cast and it wasn't good, he'd look at me dead in the eye and say, that was the worst cast I've ever seen. So when you're fishing with someone like that, you're going to try to pick up your game as quick as possible.
Yeah.
I was so grateful that, those guys, like I said, taught me the way out here. And really, I feel I owe them a big shout out. Now, obviously, I want to thank Frying Pan Anglers, too, for recommending me. That's, really nice of them. And as soon as I, started fishing these rivers, the Roaring Fork of Colorado and the Frying Pan, there was no looking back for me. I'd go back to the East Coast and fish a river there where it was like, oh, big men, let that fly drift for as long as possible without moving it and hope something happens. Or you'd run into a situation where there were so many naturals on the water that you really had to work to like get a fish to key in on your own thing. And as soon as I came out here and started slapping foam around on, big tippet and all this kind of stuff, it was just totally different. I mean, I was hooked, no pun intended. So
that's cool.
Yeah, there was no looking back for me there. And yeah, I think that I've just had so many different sort of experiences on each of these rivers that you never know what you might run into. And that's something that's kept me, coming back for more and more.
Yeah.
And definitely, as the old saying goes, it's so much more about the fish that I haven't got into the net. Like sometimes you'll be floating through a section or wading a section that you fished 15 times already that year. I had this happen about a month ago on the Frying Pan up at mile 12. I was taking a boyfriend-girlfriend couple. It was maybe their first time, first couple times on the fly rod, not too much experience. And, we get up there and start fishing. And I'd been to this spot a dozen times this year. Never once had I seen this rainbow sitting where it was, that day. And sure enough, what do you know, just the moon and the stars aligned. We hook into this fish, have an awesome fight. It was on 6X tippet.
Oh, wow.
We did everything we could. I kind of made that mistake of saying, oh, don't worry, we're going to get this fish in the net. And obviously, so, I felt bad, of course. But again, once you take a step back after that, that's what keeps us coming back. If we had gotten that fish in the net and it's only their second time fishing, a little too easy sort of thing. So sometimes, and this happens for myself too, where, you come across a spot, you hook a great fish, you don't get them in and you say, wow, I'll be back one day. That sort of a mentality that keeps you coming back.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. Yeah, it's, as they say, it's the one that got away, and it's always bigger in your mind than maybe it really was. But man, I was fishing last weekend and up in Ohio, and I had a big brown trout come up and stick his nose out of the water and take my fly in his mouth. I mean, it's a big head. I don't know how big the fish really was, but it looked really big.
Uh-huh.
And I set the hook. I pulled it right out of his mouth. I don't know how it happened. He took it, went under, set the hook, and he wasn't even on. Didn't even sting him.
Yep.
But boy, that fish, it means almost more to me, than some of the other ones I caught that day. So I totally get it. I wanted to ask you, you obviously love what you do. And I'm curious, what is it about guiding that you love?
I really think it's the people, In the beginning, I was making a mistake where I was living for the fish sort of a deal, see a sick fish, follow it around, catch it, whatever, this and that. And like, I was stoked. But meanwhile, the guy I was fishing with would be looking at me like, wow, we just did all that. We could have, not everyone is facing that same sort of a high. So I think once I dialed that back and kind of realized, okay, the people and the experience of meeting these people and the things we talk about, those are the most memorable trips. The trips 2 days ago with the fellow who was 93. The trip I did last summer with Joe Welk, another guide at Frying Pan Anglers, where we took a guy in a wheelchair who had MS.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so basically I
That's
placed
cool.
the fly rod under his hand and my hand over his hand, and that sort of a thing. Super memorable. Other people who, maybe the fishing was just okay that day, but through conversation and that sort of thing, it sticks out.
Yeah.
It's a two-way relationship, It's a people thing for me, and I think that aspect of it, meeting these people, helping them escape and, discover a world of fly fishing that, they might not have known the sort of beauty it has or the way, that they could be happy doing it or whatever it is. All those little things at the end of the day for me are really what make it special.
You might be changing some people's lives, giving them something new to look forward to.
Hey, if it's even one person, that's enough for me right now.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you measure success at the end of a day of guiding?
For me, it's service industry number one. So, making sure that I'm being polite, cold water in the cooler, all those little things on the service industry side. Lunch is not sloppy, the equipment's ready to go, all that kind of stuff, I would say is the number one. The fish is an afterthought. If we come across a trophy rainbow and this and that, that's bonus stuff.
Right.
I think showing people, of course, people, you got to show them the technique, all these little things, but giving them the confidence to go out there and do it on their own, I think is a huge part of it too.
Yeah, that's cool.
If you've got someone who keeps missing a hook set, you don't say to them, "Oh, come on, man." Like the first time I ever went tarpon fishing, that's my guide's attitude. "Come on, dude."
Yeah.
And like on the inside, I was ready to be like, I was not happy. So I never wanted to put that kind of a feeling onto someone else. If someone misses a hook set, you just tell them, "Hey, that was a good try. Your timing was good. Next time, try to use that shoulder and get that rod up to pick the slack out." The little things like that. But, it's similar to coaching a football team. Like you want your players to have confidence. They're going to perform at their best when they feel like, they're hot. And that's the kind of thing that I think really, really helps.
That's great. So you kind of build their confidence, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. Like I say, it's 90% mental. If you've got confidence in, your own rod, then of course use it. If you've got confidence in a certain fly that's, the same species we're fishing, then sure, that sort of a thing, I'm not going to discourage someone off of that. Little things, I've had guys who have been so superstitious, even, the type of indicator, the type of, whatever it is, I'll never, within reason, if we're fishing a beta hatch and some guy wants to break out a hopper, I'm going to tell him no. But, if I'm using a Parachute Adams and he wants to use an extended body bluing olive pattern because it's what he's caught a bunch of fish on, I'm not going to tell him no. It's going to work. The presentation is the key. Fly selection on the Frying Pan River, yes, it's important, but it's not going to make or break a day. When you're in there in the morning and all the guides are picking out flies, they may pick out 20 different patterns between the two of them, all, or, between the group of guides there, and all of them are going to catch fish. It's not that just two of those flies are the magic ticket,
Right.
Presentation is everything. If you're nymphing, then getting the flies into the right zone, whether it's using, a tungsten bead, like a bomber style, or just BB split shot on there, whatever it is, that's going to make a bigger difference than the type of fly. Adjusting the depth of the indicator from the flies is a big thing. If you're fishing the Frying Pan River, you may be in one spot that's 8 foot deep, and then you take a couple steps and it's just a 4 foot shelf, or it's just, a 2.5 foot shelf, whatever it is. Are you going to fish the same depths that you were at that 8 foot hole on that 2.5 foot shelf? Probably not. So you got to, make that little minor adjustment. All those things, really will make a difference in people's game when they fish up there.
Okay. Well, tell me about Frying Pan Anglers. So you've been with them for what, 6 years or so? Let's hear more about them. Yeah.
When I first came out here, I had another job, but Frying Pan has always been my number one. When I first moved to the Valley and I was fishing with those guys, JC and George, who I mentioned earlier, the selection of bugs at Frying Pan is unmatched. They must have 10, 12,000 patterns of flies in there, drawers and drawers of caddis, drawers of batis, midges, green drakes, everything you could need, terrestrial streamers. I mean, fly selection is A plus. And I think that aspect of it for me was part of the reason why I'd go back. Buying tippet is going to be the same. You buy it anywhere, same stuff. So that sort of thing, it is what it is. Yeah. So the fly selection is definitely something about Frying Pan anglers that I think really sets them apart. Again, on the service industry side, like I put a priority on service, and I know a lot of the guys in that fly shop have gone above and beyond to make things happen for the guides. If their shift is 8 a.m. to 5, so many times they'll be in there until 7:30, booking the guides, doing this and that, making sure the right match, whatever it takes to keep the ship running smoothly. And that's huge. I'm not going to say anything about other outfitters, this or that. I can only speak of the people I work with, and yeah, it's great. So just want to say a big thanks to Frying Pan Anglers and Hunter Bolton for the recommendation. All of these guys are great fishermen and awesome people to fish with. So no matter which guide you end up with, you're going to have some fun. I really give those guys a lot of respect.
I spoke with Hunter. Is he the main booking agent there?
So Hunter Bolton's the manager there. Great guy, really, really fishy guy. If anyone's, into the trend of Euro nymphing and wants to fish up here, he's the guy to talk to.
Okay. Yeah, he seemed great. So that's fantastic. I'm glad you got hooked up with a really top quality fly shop.
Yeah, and I just want to say, congratulations to Hunter. He just had a baby yesterday, so that's really exciting, his first kid.
Oh, man, that's exciting. Yeah, so hopefully he gets a little time off here towards the end of the year. Do you guys run trips up to alpine lakes and streams?
We do, yep. We've got some permits to go back there, whether it's Lime Creek, headwaters of the Frying Pan Lakes. Now, that does become definitely a full day trip. You don't want to do a 4-hour session for all that stuff. It's not worth it by the time you get up there. If we're fishing the Frying Pan River, that's a 15-minute drive, sometimes even a 5-minute drive to the spot, depending on where you're going. If you're fishing in that backcountry, you're probably looking at, over an hour in the car, minimum, I'd say.
Yeah. And you've got some private water access as well?
We do. So Frying Pan Anglers offers accommodation to anglers who are coming into town through 2 different places. The Frying Pan River Lodge, which is located right in Basalt across the street from the fly shop. And, they've got a little section of private river on the Frying Pan in town. Now, the Taylor Creek Cabins is the second option. That's about 6 miles up on the Frying Pan. And that section of private water there, I would say, is A+ water. The Drake Hatch can be biblical in that section. You've got some perfect log jams and little pools that come out. It's a really great stretch. I think it's got to be close to a mile of water. I'm going off the top of my head there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, if people are staying at the Taylor Creek Cabins, they can fish that section of water, and only them. You're not going to have folks who are in from town on the weekend going there and hitting that water. So, that's a great option for people.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Well, take us through the seasons. What are the major hatches and what are you doing at different times of the year to catch fish?
Sure. So, January, February through the winter, we're fishing lots of eggs and midges. Again, cluster midge patterns or, little bubble backs, things like that can work really, really well. And, once we get out of that really cold window and into spring, that's when, beta hatches start to pick up, sort of around Mother's Day. Loosely, you get the Mother's Day caddis hatch, just like, the other Western rivers here. Once that water temperature hits the right point and those bugs start kicking off, that's in my mind really the start of summer season.
Okay.
In the spring, again, big stonefly nymphs can be awesome. Batis nymphs, awesome.
Like how big are those stoneflies?
You can use like a natural size in like 6, 8, 10, anything in there. And so I should back up, that's golden stones there. Winter stones, of course, you can run some smaller patterns for that kind of stuff, darker colors. But come the end of March, April, especially if you're in the lower section there, you can fish some bigger stuff. Generally speaking, as you move up the mile markers on the river, with the exception of certain hatches, those bugs are getting smaller as you go up, sort of thing. You'll find fish that are much more forgiving in the lower few miles, eating a size 8 patch rubber leg or something like that, versus like a fish who's up at mile 12 who will probably definitely not take that thing. Now, it depends. For that time of year, the hatches are moving up the river. So you kind of got to follow it along as you fish if that's the way you're going about things. Spring season, if you're fishing in the upper bit, it's going to be a lot of like beta, swinging some soft tackles, that kind of stuff can work well. It's hard to say when you're not in the moment, and I'm not going to give anyone, dead set advice here that if they show up, it's going to work. But this is to give them an idea of what's going on. So you've still got midges, and midges will be throughout the entire year. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's like an early morning in July, you can catch fish on midges. The Baetis, usually will kick up next, followed by PMDs and green drakes and caddis. And then come the end of summer, we get a really special hatch, the Ceratella hatch. Lots of guys I work with don't even mess with it, don't even tie flies for it, nothing like that. But again, if you drive up there and it's a busy day and your only spot that you're going is, that spot and that's the hatch that's happening, what, are you not going to fish it?
What's the name of the hatch, Eli?
The Ceratella. And so it's a flightless mayfly. It's got very strange behavior, unique to this river in the sense that when they built the dam at Rudai, this bug had to basically adapt or die. Again, this is something that's a handful of people are going to come and fish specifically for it.
I gotcha.
Most people, like if you're fishing one of those spots, you could run a PMD comparadon, when they're coming off and probably be just fine. Sometimes drakes are coming off at the same time. So it's not necessarily, a key hatch, but it's special. So I think it deserves a mention.
All right. And green drakes are big, right? Blooming olives. What else?
Yep. Green drake is our most prolific mayfly. Usually come post runoff, it's working its way up the Roaring Fork and into the frying pan. So the hatch will kind of kick off, work its way up Glenwood, Carbondale into Basalt, split off up the Frying Pan River there. And like I said earlier, at the time of recording, we've still got drakes coming off right now. And, that's just that's just because the flows were so low for so long. They didn't have the right conditions to do their thing until recently. So, yeah, we've been fishing that, pretty hard for about a month now. And I really think what makes the green drake special, it's a big dry fly and that's cool. But, some of these other Western hatches, like it can be almost impossible to time. So like if you're dying to fish a salmon fly hatch, good luck unless you live in a place that has the salmon flies. Because what will happen is once it kicks off and those fish feed, you've got a window, a very brief window of good feeding. With the green drakes, you're still fishing a size 10 dry fly and they'll eat it every day for months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I think, definitely has some allure to it. The bug itself, it can be a lot of fun to get the natural presentation. Sometimes a dead drift isn't what they're looking for. Sometimes they want it right on a swing. My trip yesterday, like we eliminated the first 80% of our drift, basically started swinging the fly straight across, the riffles there, and boom, they're coming up to hit it. So that can be a lot of fun. It's the same thing with caddis. I think I mentioned to you when we spoke before the recording about, swinging flies and
right,
doing things like that on a Portland Creek hitch or a riffling hitch. So
what is that?
So, after you've put your fly onto your tippet and you're getting ready to fish, you can use a Portland Creek hitch. This is only if you're planning on, swinging a fly, but you give it the hitches over the eye of the hook so that your tippet is not coming off the front. Your tippet is off perpendicular to the fly. So what that does is when you're making your swing, keeps the head of that fly, the profile of it moving across the fish.
So it's a knot.
Yep, it's a knot to adjust your tippet, for the finish on the fly so that it's laying perpendicular instead of, straight in line with it. So it creates that little L. Yep. So as you're swinging it across the riffles, the head of that fly is moving right towards shore, as natural as possible. Certain streamers can be fished that way, like gongas and different things like that. And, if you tie your own flies and want to look into that, leave yourself a little bit of extra space behind the eye so that when you hitch that tippet, you've got room to clip it on there.
Huh, cool.
If you're going to be if you're going to be, throwing a circus peanut or some kind of streamer that has a lot of material in the front, some deer hair or something, just, trim it back a little, give yourself just a little bit of space to do that. Again, you can catch plenty of fish without it, but the difference between 12 fish and 6 fish, let's say, could be that little bit of presentation right there. So,
yeah, right. And so you're fishing this down and across, even though they're dry flies, down and across. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
For example, the Mother's Day caddis hatch, I took a young man out there before, one of my trips, and I kind of told him, okay, Teddy, here's the deal. If this really kicks off, I want you to promise me not to tell everyone tomorrow when you're working in the fly shop about it, because I got to bring my trip here. So Teddy had never swung or, skated caddis before. And in that moment, I make the first cast to demonstrate, boom, second cast, boom, third cast, boom. And that's, typical Mother's Day caddis hatch, that first, solid window. Yeah, it's just, oh man, so good. I'm already looking forward to it. 2021.
When is that hatch?
Loosely Mother's Day, but again, the key is just the water in the right temperature. So, again, if you don't live there, it's going to be difficult to time it exactly unless you're checking the flows, checking the water temperatures, all those type of things.
I got you.
But, here's the thing. Once it starts, it stays solid.
Oh, good.
We're talking all the way through July. Yeah. And that's one of the things that people in fly fishing love: mayflies. And I think caddis don't get enough love. Trey Gershaw, who's another guy at Frying Pan Anglers, kind of feels the same way as me about that. If you live out in the West and you're not using enough caddis, especially nymphing, here, I'll put it to you this way, right? Behavioral drift in caddis, when conditions are right and it's time for them to move their home or, find a new home or build a new home or do that stuff, you will outfish someone who's using mayflies. But, you will outfish someone who's using mayflies during that behavioral drift for caddis because the fish are keyed into them. Lots of times, guys I come up with here, I tie on an elk hair caddis and they say, oh boy, I don't know about that. Caddis? I haven't seen any caddis.
Oh, really?
Listen, bud, if that fish pokes its head out, what are you going to do? And sure enough, the caddis can be a go-to. So especially, certain times of year, it's going to, like I said, really, really be the hot ticket. But if people haven't come out here and skated caddis and do that kind of thing, that can be a lot of fun. I know folks who come out here fishing who say they never get to fish dry flies where they're from. It's rare. The only fish they catch are nymphing. So when they come here and start skating size 12 caddis, on the water and seeing the fish explode, it really gets them going, gets me going, like I said. So
how do you decide today's a day I need to skate patterns or today's a day I need to dead drift patterns? How do you decide that?
Natural presentation on caddis, they're almost always going to be skating to try to, dry their wings and get off of there. Sometimes certain patterns, like, look, okay, I mentioned the same thing for green drakes, right? If you're fishing a cripple pattern green drake, I don't know if skating it is necessarily the move. It still worked for us and this kind of thing. But if the feed is on, the feed is on. If you're working a situation where you've got to have it just right, that cripple pattern is probably stuck the way it is, drifting down, not able to finish its job. So,
okay.
If you're fishing a dun, yes, skate it, give it that action, try to, make it appear as though it's drying its wings, getting ready to take flight. And so many times on these hatches, like, you'll see fish coming up on your fly. And it's the moment right when it leaves the water that boom, they'll come snap at it. So skating flies out here, and again, it can be midges, it can be, that Saratella I was talking about,
right.
It works. Yeah, it works.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we've had that. I've come across that a couple of times. I know up in the driftless area in Wisconsin, we did a show a couple of months ago, and he was saying that movement is just as important as size, color, pattern.
Absolutely.
They just really key in on it. So, all right, so let's keep going here. So you've got July and August. What have you got? Yellowstones. What else are you fishing?
So July and August, yep, the dray catch, caddis. You can get into some decent streamer fishing depending on weather patterns and that kind of stuff. If it's like end of August and you're kind of having an overcast day and this and that, throwing streamers can be a great option. If you're on the frying pan, you're gonna want to stick to some smaller stuff for that, especially in through the fall. A full size dungeon is probably not the best choice, but a baby ganga or even a mini dungeon, something like that is probably a little more, something that the fish can really get their mouth on and hit with confidence.
Okay.
So a smaller streamer, yep, bugger style, of course, that stuff can work well out here too.
All right. What would be kind of cool is if we could take some pictures of some of these flies you like and stick them out on our Destination Angler Facebook page. What do you think about that?
Sure, not a problem, yeah.
Okay. That'd be great because people might not know what a ganga is or a dungeon. I think everybody knows what a woolly bugger is these days, but yeah, that's great. Okay. And then into late summer, early fall, what are you doing then?
Early fall, kind of like I touched on my trips these past few days. I've been swinging a lot of soft tackles, pre-hatch, your classic partridge and olive, or partridge and orange, can be great. Those sort of style flies, even some pheasant tail, soft tackles, that stuff can work really, really well. It's all kind of dependent on the flows and the weather. If, I was to go out on a trip tomorrow and we were going to have an overcast day and some rain and stuff, I'd be on Baetis almost the whole day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep. We're definitely, into that window here. And the blueing hatches have been sick. So it's a lot of fun as long as, you can see the fly. And of course we use little tricks, bigger dry in front of us, smaller dry and that kind of thing to help people see. But, if you're able to see a size 22 bluing, you can get into fish all day nonstop.
Go for it. Yeah, no, go for it. What's the story on these mysis shrimp?
Sorry, real quick. I can't forget about the October caddis because that's another great one that we have in the fall. So the October caddis in the, western rivers, it's got an orange, fall color to it. It's big. When you fish an adult, we're talking a size 8, like a nice foam wrap, orange body, maybe with a little bit of ribbing and, some hackle and elk hair and stuff. That's a decent recipe right there. You don't need much. Yesterday I was just swinging some orange thread on a hook, basically with a little bit of, dark head, and it was working well. So that kind of thing, can be good. But the October caddis is an awesome bug. It's another big dry fly. Who doesn't like fishing big dry flies, especially in the fall?
Yeah, nice.
And you mentioned the myses. I believe that there's 3 tailwaters in Colorado with the Mysis shrimp, one by Silverthorne, not positive, the Frying Pan River where we are here, and the Taylor River in Crested Butte. These shrimp live in schools in the reservoirs. When the water from the dam dumps them out, they're coming through. It's not necessarily always a consistent sort of feed, but, it's it's protein. So you'll notice, if you're fishing in the flats and you've got to be within a couple hundred yards of the dam for this to work, you'll be fishing shrimp and all of a sudden, boom, every cast. And then 20 minutes, nothing, and then all of a sudden, boom, every cast and then nothing. And, that's normal. Fish who live in the middle and lower section of the river have never seen one of these before.
Oh,
the food is completely gone within that first couple hundred yards as far as the shrimp go. I'm sure there's plenty of people who have heard about the toilet bowl.
Yeah.
In the frying pan, it's similar to the hog trough in the Taylor River, but that's a section that you can go and dredge and find some dogs, as we say. So
the mysis shrimp get eaten. It's not that they die; they get eaten.
Oh, so they do die when they hit the tailwater section. Their eyes turn orange. So if you're looking at a mysis shrimp fly pattern with an orange eye, it's replicating a dead one. But the fish don't care. They'll eat them dead or alive. The shrimp, or rather the fish, who are in that middle, or even how can I describe it, lower of the upper section of the Frying Pan River, lots of them haven't even seen those shrimp before.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they're completely gone by the time they get dumped out of there.
So very location specific.
Now, of course, fish who are eating shrimp all day are going to get big. So I mentioned the hog trough in Crested Butte, the bowl and the flaps that we have in the Frying Pan. Again, if you go up there, you can find some monsters.
Oh, man. Sounds like fun. We've just got a couple minutes left here. Let's touch on conservation for a minute or two. What's going on? How's the river doing, and what are people doing to help things out there?
The river's healthy. Like I said, the population of brown trout seems to be almost out of control in a sense. And, the rainbows really require special care. So as far as conservation goes, I think big things to note for anglers are please be cautious in the spring and fall of stomping on reds.
Yeah.
These fish are very delicate, and, if you don't know what you're looking for, it's a tough sort of situation. I understand that, but, do a little bit of research, because as guides, at the end of the day, we're only as good as our fisheries. So if we've got people coming, stomping on reds, using bait when they shouldn't be using bait and that sort of thing. I've got a nauseating story from last week. Me and this other guide, Harry Portland, we're up there at mile marker 12, and I'm looking in the water, and I see this like weird sort of greenish tint. And, I walk down there and grab it, and it's a throw net, like what you would use off of a dock for bait fish. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And now Harry's from Jersey, I'm from New York. So we knew right away, and I told him, we've got to call the game warden. So there's still people who are coming, poaching fish, trapping, doing it the wrong way. Yeah, it's really tough. Now, we don't have the luxury of just calling the game warden. There's no cell phone service up there. So if you run into that situation, you either confront them or you let it slide, right?
Yeah.
So letting it slide probably leads to more of the same, in my opinion. Now, if you confront them, you might run into other problems. We've had that happen too. I remember fishing the flats 2 years ago with some buddies, and when we had the afternoon off after a trip, and we saw a guy catch like a 24-inch rainbow and just walk right up to the truck. And we kind of, in the beginning, were like, did that really just happen? Or are we seeing things or what, But no cell phone service. We can't call in a license plate or anything. So, we cross the river, we go up there, boom, truck's gone. So little situations like that, stop by Frying Pan Anglers, ask about the regulations. If you want to keep fish, you can keep fish. 2 browns under 14 inches per angler. And, the fish are like veal. You don't want to eat them when they're big. You want to eat those little babies. So,
yeah,
there's a right way to do things. Now, on the conservation side, keeping fish out of the river every once in a while, I think, can be good. Like we talked about, there's so much competition for food. If we pluck out a few of these small browns, the population of rainbows very well, could have a chance at bouncing back to the way it was in the 80s when you were here, my dad was here, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
A tricky situation here. Some guys you talk to, I'm sure they'll totally preach catch and release. Other guys say, once in a while, let's keep some fish. Out of the roughly, 100 trips I've done this season, we've kept fish twice. It's something that in the beginning, I was a huge advocate of catch and release and doing this, and I still am. However, now there's research showing that some of these fish are losing weight over time, or, they're not feeding the same well because of that constant pressure. And, I can share some of that information with you, but, these guys who tagged char and, went back and caught them and, reweighed them and the whole thing, the argument can be made that those fish are less healthy.
Because they've been caught so many times?
Yeah. And so, over time, they're going to stop eating the real food because they're being cautious or this or that, or, it's not the same thing. Now, in the Frying Pan, because of how many people we have, I think it would be a problem if everyone was keeping fish. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
But there's sort of a cap or a limit or a sort of thing. It's really no different than, managing the population of elk, right? Or something similar.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And you were telling me before the show that you've caught fish that have, terrible damage to their mouths that they've been caught so
Oh,
often.
yeah.
Wouldn't a lot of that not be, if people use barbless hooks, that would solve a lot of the problems, wouldn't it?
It definitely would. One of the things is that people are allowed to come up here and spin fish. This is not like a fly only, it's artificial only, but someone can still come in here with a MEPS as long as it's unscented on a spin rod and huck it in there and,
Okay.
do something. So oftentimes we think, yeah, of course, if you're using a barbed fly and it's stuck in a lip and you're like, shaking it off there, yeah, it might not end well.
Yeah.
But, if you pinch your barbs, even if you're using the little spinner, whatever you're doing, just try to respect these fish. Like I said, as guides, we're only as good as our fisheries. Barbless flies, like I said, and if you are spin fishing, that's okay. Like I mentioned to you on the phone, who am I to deny someone else the happiness this place has to offer? If you want to be out there and you want to fish and you want to use a spin rod, then, do it, but do it the right way.
Yeah.
Really, really funny story here is that I was up in the flats. This is a different day than that guy who poached the bow, but, we're up there and we got the micey shrimp and this whole thing. And we walk up to this guy and he's got cocktail shrimp up there. And my buddy and I started laughing. Oh, okay, yeah, there's a little bit of a language barrier going on here, and showed him the right thing and this and that. And that guy actually ended up going back to Frying Pan Anglers and buying a fly rod and doing the whole thing the right way.
Oh, he did. Okay. So you handled that well, it sounds like. Oh man, that's really funny. I've never heard that one before. Oh my gosh. Well, okay. One last question. What are some of the, everybody maybe is familiar with Aspen and there's plenty of really great places to go have dinner and a beer after a day of fishing, but what are some of the out of the way watering holes that people might not know about?
Ooh, out of the way watering holes. Well, we're talking about towns of 6,000 people, so you got limited options here. The Brick Pony in Basalt can be a good stop, for a beer. The Tipsy Trout can be a good stop for a beer. If you want to go off the beaten path a little, Capitol Creek Brewery in Basalt, that can be a good place to go. Good food, good drinks. The Green Drake IPA is definitely a go-to for that time of year.
That's cool.
Yeah, there's a couple options, but not much.
That's great. Well, Eli, thank you so much for being on the show. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
My pleasure. So you can either call Frying Pan Anglers and get in touch with me if people want to contact me directly. Instagram could be a good way. Rise Fishing, RYZ Fishing. You can shoot me a message, contact Frying Pan Anglers. Either of those outlets would be a great way to get started.
Okay, that sounds great. So we'll put all this out on our show notes on our website, and we'll also put some pictures of Eli's top picks, flies, on our Facebook page. And thank you all for listening. Eli, I wish you extraordinary success in your guiding adventures. Hey, folks, remember to tip your guide. People like Eli work pretty hard, and I know I like to tip guides based on how hard they work and how friendly and knowledgeable they are, not how many fish you catch. You can certainly email me with any comments or suggestions at shaigh50@gmail.com. That's shaigh50@gmail.com. Please give us a share, like, or follow on Facebook or Instagram, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And we rely on anglers like you to spread the word, so please tell your buddies about the podcast. As always, our music is by our Brothers Fountain, and I hope you enjoy the show, and we'll see you again next week.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.